Hello and welcome to my September edition of the Gareth Johnston Golf newsletter, and I wanted to talk to you about the similarities in playing at the top of the game. And don't get me wrong, you know, it's a very different level that these players play versus the club golfer, but nonetheless, if these are at the point of the triangle, the pinnacle of the game, there will need to be some form of emulation in terms of technique. And I've got four players, four different styles, four contrasting swings. I've got Schwartzel, Adam Scott, Luke Donald and Dustin Johnson. And I wanted to just highlight the similarities in playing despite the differences in technique. I wanted to talk to you about what makes these guys so good. Now, swing playing is vital. You would have heard it, very big buzzword on television amongst the pundits, but basically, playing is so important because it influences a number of factors it impacts. It influences path, influences face, and influences angle of attack. So if we can optimise playing, we can optimise those factors. And don't get me wrong, if you have good playing, that does not mean you're going to hit the ball straight. There are other things that can come in, but it will at least give you a good jump start into making those inroads into your technique. Now, I've drawn a very simple illustration here from the centre of the club face or the ball through the elbow out the other side of the body on each of these players. So they've all got different clubs. I think Luke Donald here is using a 2 or a 3 iron. Adam Scott's using a 5 iron here. Schwartzel's using something with a little more loft, and so too is Johnson. But nonetheless, the playing line will still remain the same. So if we look at Adam Scott first, you'll note that as the club goes back and moves up to halfway, the club has really not shifted away from that plane line very much at all. In fairness, it's actually almost textbook, I would say. As the club then moves up, you'll see how it moves in plane still. Now, there are a multitude of planes that the club is swung on, so there is not one plane. There are methods that try and get the player swinging on that one plane, and courses for courses, it might work for some people, but generally the golf club will move through a multitude of planes throughout the golf swing. So if we can swing in relation to that, as tight to that as we can, with very little shift in plane, you will be a very consistent golfer. Now, if you watch Adam Scott as he gets halfway back, club gets to the halfway back position, up to the top of the swing, then as the club returns into impact, or comes down into impact, moves into its fastest positions, you'll see here that the club actually returns down onto the plane line, and from here gathers speed. If we use this line here that I've drawn loosely as the ball to target line, you'll see that the club is attacking the ball. The club has not appeared over here, and nor has the club shaft got too vertical in the downswing. If you think about the line in which the club head travels from the club head through the shaft, through the butt of the club down to the golf ball, it is in harmony with it. It's not shifting away from that whatsoever. So for me here, you can see in simple terms, the club is travelling back and down on almost the same line with very little deviation. You look at Schwartzel, slightly different lines here, but nonetheless, the club works back down toward that plane line, slightly under it this time. Remember, camera angle is important here. The camera angles are all slightly different, but nonetheless, it's a good way of showing you and describing this to you. Club comes in and approaches the ball slightly on the inside of the target line in just a few frames just prior to impact. You look at Luke Donald, club works halfway back, a little more upright, his set position, as he gets up to the top and brings the club down, once again, into wonderful plane. Now, we do not know what kind of shot these guys are hitting, okay? These are just video images or video footage, so they might be hitting fades or draws, but nonetheless, you can see the plane is very uniform with all of them. And then Dustin Johnson, guys say his technique is funky. Well, I actually think he brings the club through a series of wonderful, wonderful positions. There are no positions in the swing. You know, the swing is fluid, but there are checkpoints, and he swings the club through lots of very good checkpoints in the golf swing. And you can see here, shaft is coming down into impact in that wonderful pre-delivery like everybody else. Four completely contrasting styles, yet the club has attacked the ball once again, just ever so slightly on the inside of that ball to target line. Now, my reference for you all here is if you can swing the club around your body with very little deviation in plane, you will then not be forced to mess around with the club face. So for example, if the club is swung back on this line here, let's say, and as the club starts to swing down into impact, it drops a little too far under plane here. Generally the swing line will be a little bit too far out to the right. So the more you swing the club out to the right as a feeling, the more you are going to have to close the face to that path in order to get the ball to curve back. Otherwise you'll be leaving the ball outright more often than not. The other way round to this is if your shaft line in the downswing gets a little too vertical, so the shaft in the downswing is more on this side of the plane line, we would call that a more vertical plane, and from that you would generally, there are exceptions, but you would generally tend to see a very leftward swing. The more left you're swinging the golf club, the more open to that path you're going to have the face in order to bring the ball back to the right and on target. So generally speaking, if we can optimise plane, we can then start to control club face better. So the more out the plane, the more we will be reliant on other factors in order to help us get the ball to go where we want it to. So in layman's terms, if we can swing the club around the body on a very uniform line, as the club goes up to the top, you'll see here, if I draw a line from this shaft, it's on this side of the golf ball, the player's side of the ball. We'll do the same with all of these guys. So you'll see here with Adam Scott, shaft is on the player's side of the golf ball. Luke Donald, shaft plane is on the player's side, and exactly the same with DJ, as they call him. You will then see similarities in halfway back position too. So from that, if you can then, as you swing down, try and keep the club head behind your body. You'll see here it's still behind his back. You'll see the same thing with Schwartzel. Club head stays behind the back. Same thing with Donald. Club head remains behind the player. And Johnson. You will stand a great chance of delivering that club on plane. Now, when the club starts to get, the club head starts to get up above the player, i.e. much more up here, up above the player's head, we're generally in trouble. So don't get me wrong, there are players out there with fantastic hand-eye coordination that can correct this at a very late stage, but as coaches we don't want those very late corrections. We want the player to be in a very good pre-delivery position, round about this position here. We want them in tidy technical positions, tidy technical sequences as they start to deliver the club to the golf ball by this time. So if they're not in good position here, they are not really going to hit a very successful shot unless they have hit lots and lots of golf balls in order to ingrain a corrective move. So my point being, it's, this isn't a lesson to anybody. This is just a little bit of description of what good ideal swing plane would be. Simple swing thought to help you achieve that. But if you want any further help with your technique or your game, please feel free to contact me at gareth@garethjohnstongolf.com, or alternatively visit my website www.garethjohnstongolf.com. I hope you've enjoyed this. See you next month.